Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. My name is Marcella from Hana House in Palo Alto. Welcome to our October Business Bites. This is a virtual event series hosted by On Its Axis and Hana House. On Its Axis is an innovation consulting firm based in Southern California, and Hana House is a flexible co-working space and cafe with locations in Palo Alto and Newport Beach. Hana House offers pay-by-the-hour workspace reservations, which is unique to the co-working world. There is no membership required and can be used by anyone at your own convenience. We are also partnered with Blue Bottle Coffee in our space. And due to the pandemic, we were closed for over a year, but we have officially reopened and we're so happy to welcome guests back into both of our locations. We have also increased our sanitation protocols and safety standards to ensure an enhanced workspace experience. If you are ever in the Bay Area or Orange County, feel free to stop by and check out hanahouse.com to reserve a space and learn more about our seating options, prices, and more. For today's session, feel free to interact by asking questions and using the chat feature. Let's all start off by sharing where we're all tuning in from. And as a reminder, this session is being recorded and will be shared on our YouTube channel within the next week. Now, I would like to invite our moderator, Kelly from On Its Axis, to guide us through today's wonderful panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Marcella, and thank you to our panelists who've been able to join us today. I'm really excited for the October session as we explore the conversation of leadership and really look at it from the lens of the role of management for tomorrow's workplace. Over the course of 2021, we've spent a number of our sessions in this virtual Business Bites series talking about the impact of change on the ways that we work and how we collaborate and exploring what the future of work looks like. Today, we're going to really dive in from the lens of those that are helping to navigate the path of leadership. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be exploring this conversation with an incredible group of leaders as panelists and volunteer panelists. So thank you so much to our panelists for joining today. As always in this Business Bites series, we'll be going through a series of questions that we'll be talking to one another about, and then we'll have an opportunity for you in the audience to be able to ask your questions of our panelists. So thank you to our panelists for joining. I'm really excited to welcome you. I'll start with you, Susan, if you don't mind, if you could briefly introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your role and your connection to leadership.
Oh, Susan, you're on mute.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, everyone. I am really excited to be here as leadership is one of my favorite topics. A little bit about me. I am on the third chapter of my career. My first chapter was in Fortune 500 companies. As an executive, I grew up at Procter & Gamble in brand management. From there, I led the marketing for Coors Beer. And then I took Peet's Coffee National as the head of growth. And that was chapter 1. And from there, I went into the fun, wonderful world of tech startups. And I built and sold a fintech company that we were the actual creators of the original reward checking accounts for community banks and credit unions. It's still live today and has enough branches to equate to the 5th largest institution. We grew to around 325 people. And every year that I was there, we got Austin's best place to work, which is what I'm most proud of. And from there, I started a IoT consumer company that was an Apple Watch for dogs and cats to find indicators of pain or illness. Learned a lot of new lessons with COVID and product supply and chips and components and what that does. So exited that early this year and ended chapter 2. And now I'm on chapter 3, and I'm spending a lot of time doing executive coaching for CEOs and their leadership teams at both Fortune 500 and high tech startups, and also expanding my board work. And so I've seen leadership at all sizes, all stages of growth, and it's just such an amazing topic, because I personally am so counting on this next generation to get us out of the messes that we've got ourselves in. So awesome.
Thank you so much, Susan. I feel your journey and enthusiasm, and I'm so excited to learn from you in today's conversation. I'm also incredibly excited to see how our panelists' stories come together. And Jeanine, as I come to you, I'll ask you the same question. Can you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us about your role?
Hi, my name is Jeanine Brown. I'm the founder of a nonprofit organization, Empower Her Too, and I'm also the executive director for the Toronto location, just the founder for the Florida location. And of course, I'm a leader, I guess you could say. And I would say more so, I look more so at servant leadership, just really helping, not only the community with the girls between 14 to 21, but also within my staff, and, teaching them things that they need to learn, having, personal development programs or meetings so that they can learn as well. I also run a few party supply stores. I am the founder as well. I do a whole bunch of other things as well, but for me, my biggest thing when it comes to leadership is just showing people that, I really differentiate between boss and leader. And I really don't like when someone's like, I'm the boss, because I find that very bossy and sort of like entitlement. Whereas for me, I think leadership is leading your team. And, yes, everybody wants a successful company, but you are only as good as your teammates, right? And if you are someone who's sitting as a leader in your business and you don't really understand what's going on, you're just throwing shots at everybody to do things, how can you lead them to be successful? So that kind of tells you a little bit about myself, where I'm really, really big on leadership. And I truly believe that every single company needs to reevaluate their staff, their executive staff, because a lot of these people, unfortunately, are so used to you do this, you do that, you do this, versus, hey, how can I help? And I'm more so of a believer, how can I help?
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to have you here. Coming to you, Barbie, certainly excited to hear your introduction and your connection to leadership.
Sure. First, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here with all of you and this great, my fellow panelists. So thank you, everyone, and for all of the audience who's joining us and who will watch it in the future. My name is Barbie Winterbottom, and I am the founder and CEO of the Business of HR. And so my background is I've got many years working in the human resources and people space. And over the past 18 months since I founded my own consultancy, it's really grown into a lot of different avenues, which is fantastic. I have really deep roots in talent acquisition, culture transformation, change leadership. And much like what Jeanine was saying, is I absolutely believe there's a difference between management and leadership. We manage process and projects, and we lead people. And there's a pretty significant distinction between the two. And a lot of my coaching is around how to transition and transform from the manager to the leader. And you don't necessarily even have to have direct reports to be a leader. You can be an individual contributor and have significant influence and leadership within an organization. It's based on the how, right? We're often so focused on measuring the what, but it's the how that really sets people apart. And so that's a big part of the work I do, is helping folks to create that foundation and that anchor for value-centered leadership.
Thank you so much. I'm truly excited about today's conversation. And I loved, as you were introducing yourselves to our audience today, how each of you began to weigh in on this idea of leadership. We heard about this idea of servant leadership and the differentiation of boss from leader. And we hear about this idea of really anchoring ourselves in the role of leadership as something more than a title. and a function within an organization. I'm going to come to you, Jeanine, first, and I'm going to ask you to weigh in on what leadership means to you, particularly in the context of the changing workforce that we're in 2021.
Perfect. You can hear me now, right? Perfect.
Yes, I can hear you now.
So I truly believe leadership is a whole different ballgame right now, especially with everyone being virtual, majority of the staff members being virtual, with mental health obviously occurring and causing a lot of changes within the workplace. And I truly believe that with the new way the world is going, that is very important to be an actual leader, not just say it, but to do it. Whether that means, one of your staff members missing and you have to step in, whether that means someone is going through something and you need to lead them to the end result. Because for me, I'm a leader of solutions. Personally, I don't like when someone comes to me and says, hey, so-and-so's sick today, because I'm looking at you like, okay. Like, so what is your solution, right? Because I love solution. I'm a solution-based leader, let's put it that way. And so I truly believe that, for me, leadership really is being a servant leader, leading your team, leading those in front of you to understand the importance of being successful within themselves, not just a business. Understanding that, you don't have to be sitting on Zoom 8 hours a day. You can sit on Zoom for 2 hours a day, but guess what? As long as your work is completed, as long as you are satisfied with what you're submitting and your deadlines are met, I truly believe that that person is a leader, because they're leading when it comes to their work. They're leading when it comes to teaching their other staff members, their coworkers, like, hey, this is right versus this is wrong. I believe that we all need to really understand the importance of being a leader, no matter what position you are in, right? You can be the coordinator, lead everyone else around you. You can be the owner of the company. Come back in and show your staff, how can you lead them to success? How can you lead them to be better staff members? Maybe they're struggling at something. And for me, what I do a lot of times is I will just randomly pick staff members and be like, hey, let's have a meeting. And they're like, wait, what? What did I do? You didn't do anything. What can I do to lead you, to teach you something that you need help with? Or maybe your manager is not helping you, but I wouldn't know that because you're not going to come to me because I'm the owner of the company. You're going to just complain about it to everybody else or go to HR. But I actually genuinely want to know, how could we lead you to be better in your position?
Thank you so much for sharing that perspective. I can't wait to hear, particularly as that conclusion of your perspective, how Barbie will weigh in on this idea of what leadership means. And Barbie, so I'll come to you now.
Sure. So there's so much happening in the workplace, and I use that term loosely because there's so many variabilities, right? We've got some people working from home 100%. We have some people in a hybrid model. We have some people who have always been in the office or at the actual physical structure, people who can't do their jobs remotely. So it actually looks different than it used to look. So it also feels differently. And one of the things that I stress in my coaching is that leaders of today and of the future, I believe, will be defined by their ability to adapt and adopt both the changes that we see in the marketplace and society, but also internally. Leading means to me having an entrepreneurial mindset, even if you're an employee, right? It's the intrapreneur. It's someone who looks around the corner and anticipates what could be an issue, takes ownership of that issue, and drives it forward to a solution. As Jeanine was saying, we definitely want people who have the ability to understand what it means to be empowered and to empower others and to take that next step. We have had for years, if we look at the evolution of work and the different elements that existed from the industrial age and then into the more modern workplace, there's so many micro and macro evolutions we've experienced that it definitely takes time for people to kind of wrap their head around where they are now and what it's going to take to move them forward. And learning agility is going to be huge. It is, in my opinion, huge today, but it's the differentiator of someone who will be perceived as a leader versus someone who will be perceived as a doer. And there's nothing wrong with being one or the other, but be who you are. If you're not someone who is able to step into that leadership role as a people leader, that's okay, own it, and be that individual contributor. If you're going to lead people, then understand what that's going to take. And every person you're leading has an individual set of needs. It is not a one size fits all. There's no silver bullet. I think one of the paramount differences in leadership of the future is going to be an individuality based approach. Because if we were to ask everybody on this in the meeting right now to define what flexibility means to them, we're going to get myriad different responses, because what flexibility means to me is not what flexibility means to anyone else. So when we say as an organization, we are a flexible workforce, that's great. But what the heck does that mean? So we need leaders who understand that flexibility and agility and entrepreneurial mindset, all of these things are individualized for that person, and you can't paint everything with the same brush anymore. It's not that whole TQM type of mentality where one size fits all. That's not what leadership of today and the future is going to be.
Thank you so much for such a great beginning to today's conversation. Susan, as I come to you with this question of what does leadership mean to you, I'd love to hear from your perspective as somebody who's worked across a wide variety of organizational maturity levels. You've shared sort of the 3 phases of your career, from the Fortune 500 experience to the experience in that startup, rapidly growing startup sector, to working as a consultant and coaching other C-levels. I'm curious about how that lens has created a unique definition of leadership for you.
Yeah, I love this question because there are, as Barbie said, there's so many different ways to lead based on the person and the situation. And the most important thing is coming at it from an authentic place. So I've thought about this question a lot, and from my perspective, what fits all people and what can they really use as that filter. And for me, leadership is truly about getting others to believe in their best selves and make that transformational shift to change things forever and for good. And so I'm going to repeat that and break it down because there's several actual components in that. So inspiring others to believe in their best selves, make the transformational shifts to change things forever and good. Inspiring others. It's been said so far today, we're leading through other people. It's not positional, it's not title, but it's actually compelling other people to wanting to act. And that requires a vision and solid communication across all different stages of business. The second part to me is core to everything, which is believing in their best selves. This requires, again, enabling people to be authentic to who they are. We can't be our best selves if we're not authentic to who we are. And it's also not about who we are in that moment, instead who we can be with the support and the environment that we as leaders create. Making transformational shifts to me means we can point to those moments. If you really think back, I think all of us can point to those moments in our lives where we fundamentally changed how we thought about the business, our own leadership, the world around us. And that's really something that as leaders, we can enable to change things, which is all about action, right? We can do a lot of things on thoughts and feel good, but we want to inspire that action. And then the last 2 components of that one sentence is forever, really thinking about how do we do and lead in a way that really does change the business, make impact, change that person forever and for good. And for good use, not required in the short term. We can historically look at leaders that did things not for good. Thankfully, as the next generations are coming up, this is becoming more and more required in business by shareholders, employees, and customers to survive the long term. So I think that applies, Kelly, across all business stages to really how can we actually make transformational change.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think listening in as the moderator and hearing from each of you, this unique perspective on leadership, an element that really stands out to me is that disconnect between sort of the historic leadership perspective where there is an othering between employee and leader, and really instead hearing from each of you this individualized experience, hearing from Barbie this idea of learning agility as a key skill. That's inspiring to me. And it brings me to that next question that we have is, do you have an example of inspiring leadership that stands out for you? And if so, if you can share it with the audience. And Barbie, I'm going to come to you with this one first.
Great. Yeah, I've been so fortunate throughout my career to work with some amazing leaders, and some that were less than stellar, as we all have, I'm sure. But some of the most amazing leaders for me, as I was growing my career, and this was earlier in my career, I was at a director level, so this didn't happen at the C-suite level. But I had a leader who challenged me, just like Susan was saying, challenged me to be my best self. And that meant having direct, uncomfortable conversations. And I'm a huge follower of Dr. Brené Brown and her work. And there's a phrase I use when I'm coaching C-suite executives as well as HR professionals. And I think it's so pivotal for leaders to understand this, is you can have courage or you can have comfort, but you cannot have both. And for me, the most inspiring leader I've ever had was someone who was brave enough and had enough courage to sit me down and say, look, you're really smart. You're doing a great job in these areas, but you've got to pull some things back because you're leaving body bags in your wake. You can't come in here like a bulldozer and tell everybody what they're doing wrong all the time. That's not leadership. Leadership is inspiring people to want to change, helping them see that things can be different, helping them along the journey so that it becomes part of what they want to see as an outcome, versus you simply coming in saying, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and let me impose my ideas on you. That was, and was it an easy message for me to hear? No, it wasn't an easy message for me to hear. Did it take me a bit of time to absorb it and then authentically look at my actions and behaviors and say, wow, yeah, I do that? Yes, it took me a minute, but once I learned that lesson and saw what a different experience leadership can become when you bring people along in the right way, I will never forget that person for having the courage to sit me down and have that conversation. So to me, inspiring leadership is someone who has the courage to have difficult conversations and also set the example for being real. Admitting when they don't have all the answers, acknowledging the success and the contributions of others, being willing to say, I don't have all the answers, but let's find someone who does, and really engaging people where they can contribute and feel good about themselves. That to me sets leaders apart, is when you can help other people build their confidence in their skill set versus being the person who just tells everybody what they're doing wrong.
That resonates with me so much. I have worn the hat of bad boss in my career, and I had to personally have a courageous leader stand up and help redirect me to work on my skills of empathy and listening. And I think what you just described really strikes me. And I keep hearing this concept of listening and authenticity that keeps coming through. And Susan, as I come to you, looking for that example of inspiring leadership, I'll be listening to see if we hear that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Barbie, I'm like you. I feel so grateful for the leaders I've had, both great and not so great, from the learnings I've had. One example that truly transformed my belief on leadership as a whole was really early on in my career as well. I think I was around 5 years into my career at P&G, and I had not yet fully stepped into my confidence, as brand management at P&G was tough. Your class was ranked person by person. So you were 1 through 30. It was an up or out organization, which meant you either got promoted or you left. And at the level I was at that point as a brand manager, around 30% made it to that next level. And I was on the Tide business, and it was business review time. And as a brand manager, where you own the P&L, you own that business. And while it was an amazing learning organization, it was a pressure cooker. And it was at its peak during business review. All eyes are on you, your results, your plans, everything. And this year that I'm mentioning, everything was going south. The economy was a mess. Some of the initiatives that we had tried as a brand failed miserably. Our sales were down, and we were looking at uncertain growth for the next year on one of P&G's biggest brands. To make matters worse, I learned that Gary, who was the president of the entire laundry and soap division, was coming to the review. So I was nervous. I was doubting myself. I was sure it was going to be a rough meeting. I was unsure of my future with the company. We have the meeting. The discussion was really tough, but it was also really thought-provoking and inspiring. And when Gary went to leave, I was walking him to the elevator, and he just put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Susan, sometimes you just have to wait for the other shoe to fall. You're doing all the right things. Believe me, everything will be all right." And he recognized in that moment, I was tense. I was under pressure. And in a moment of totally unplanned candor and generosity, he took the time to say something to me that conveyed trust and confidence in who I was. It didn't change the intensity of which I went back to work, but again, it did change how I thought about the nature of leadership. It's how you make other people feel about themselves. It's their own sense of worth, their own sense of confidence, their own sense of belonging that really is going to inspire them to do the best work. And it was something that truly changed all of my leadership actions from that point forward.
Such a powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing that. Jeanine, as I come to you, looking forward to hearing your example of what stands out as inspiring leadership.
There was a woman that I remember. I don't remember her exact name, but I do remember that I had gone to this event and her staff kept coming up to her, coming up on the podium and, talking about her, because it was a congratulation party, I think it was, or it was a retirement party. I really can't remember. And the one thing that they kept saying was every time we'd have a meeting with her, she'd be very transparent, whether we were doing great at our jobs or whether we were doing a really crappy job. And that inspired me, because I noticed whenever I'd go into meetings with my staff members, it was always, "You're doing good at this," but it was never, "You're doing bad at this," because I didn't really know how to say it. So I'd always make the managers tell them, right? And from that day, being in that room, I noticed that my trajectory of the way that I spoke to my staff members was, let's start with, the transparency part of this conversation. We're here for your annual review. We're here for your bi-monthly review, whatever the case being. Let's be transparent with what are we doing wrong and how can we fix it? How do we solve it versus, "Oh, I'm going to fire you because you're doing a terrible job," right? And I think that was very important and very inspiring to me, because I think as a whole, most companies are not transparent, right? They even said, there was times when the company was in a hole and she would come out there and tell them, "Listen, guys, we're struggling right now. We're going to make it to the next quarter." And with us as a nonprofit leader, sometimes you'll have money, sometimes you won't. That's just what it is like in the nonprofit world, right? And we would never have those conversations only with our board. We never tell our, staff members, like, "Guys, we're at a plateau right now and we don't know where we're going to get 100K from for the next 6 months," or whatever the case being. And I started noticing once we started having those transparent conversations with our staff members, we would start getting more money, because then they're like, "Hey, well, we love this organization so much, we wouldn't want it to close down. So let me see what I can do about it," right? So I really think that, the most inspiring conversation I personally never had, but that what I heard was just be transparent as a leader. Just really tell people, if your company is struggling, let them know that, because you don't know on your team who can help you. You have no idea, as well as, having to hush when it comes to having these staff members. It's like everybody's wondering, do I still have a job? And I think that's one of the worst feelings is, there's something wrong in an organization or a company, but nobody's talking about it. And then weeks later you hear, "Oh, so-and-so got fired," and now they're firing 20 other people, or 50 people just got laid off. So I think for me, it was the whole transparency key, and always remembering that your staff are still people and they need to know what's going on, because at the end of the day, they work at this company and they need to know if they have a job.
Such a powerful series of stories. Thank you all for sharing them. And I can't help but feel the connections of, we talked about authenticity, and we're hearing this idea of transparency and empathy. Susan, as I come to you, I'm wondering if the role of leadership within organizations, the role itself is shifting. And if so, why? And in what key ways?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And I think it has shifted. And I think that both Jeanine and Barbie were also hitting on this. And for me, a key characteristic of leadership that has been important, but is going to become more and more and more important, is what I've sort of named resilience plus. It's about bouncing back quickly, but it's not about bouncing back in the same state. It's about bouncing back to be better. It's not about having the ability to overcome issues anymore and stand strong. It's about standing stronger. Resilience was good up till now, and now we need resilience plus. It has been an incredibly challenging couple of years. The number of things that have happened and the pace of which they've happened has been incredible. We couldn't have written this story. Depending on who you are, where you are, all of our employees, the communities that we're a part of, what businesses we're in, there are people who have experienced like really tough things. And that's the time as leaders to double down on what we believe in and what we're committed to, and to lead from that place. To me, resilience plus is using those tough things to be better. When I think about the chaos and craziness and pace of change and challenge, we have to be clear on what's important to us and what we value, and then translate it to a few clear choices. What we know out of this and going forward is that we've been reminded there are communities of people that continue to be disproportionately impacted by what happens. And I think that's so key. If we're female, you had to carry a bigger load. If you're Black or Hispanic, you've been even more disproportionately impacted in so many ways. The pace of travel has changed. We're spending more time home trying to work with our families. And we need as leaders to take the time to reflect and say what we have learned and do what we want to do to move forward and leave behind. And how are we going to be different on the other side of this? So, I mean, that's a lot, but it's resilience plus to me. It's the thing that's amazing is the opportunity for great leadership is now. We're in this unique moment where we all have this opportunity to really rethink how we move forward. It's exactly in these moments of crisis that we have to have the courage to dream big about how things should work, not how they have worked, and use these new insights on our communities, our employees, on challenges and what they feel and look like, and really about that disproportional impact to reimagine things. We have real problems to solve, and we need some reframing on those problems. So we need new, fresh thinking that my generation, I don't have the faith in actually bringing. I think this next generation of leaders and the ones coming up will. We need a range of experience to tackle these problems and to do it from that place of values. And we're at a tipping point. On top of the last couple of years, the Economic World Forum says 50% of us are going to have to learn new skills by 2025. And so we need to know we can make this change, and we cannot do it alone. Leaders everywhere are realizing tech can help, but we need to have a vision of how everyone wins and everyone can take part in this. Courage, resilience plus, leading with values, dreaming big is imperative for this, and more important than it's ever been. And I'm counting on you guys to actually bring us there. That was a lot, but I'm a little passionate about the fact that this next generation of leadership needs to really do things differently.
I'm so inspired. I don't know if I want to clap or cheer right now. And there are so many items. I know our audience is chiming into me in direct chat with follow-ups from this. And I'll share with you in the audience. I'm paying attention to these questions you're sending. We're going to have an open Q&A in just a minute, but I think all of us feel that energy. As I come to you, Jeanine, hopefully you're buzzing a bit with this energy. I'd love to know what you believe the role of leadership is, and if it's shifting. And particularly, you mentioned in your last response that there's a unique lens from that nonprofit sector So is the role of a leader within a nonprofit organization shifting? And if so, in what key ways?
Yes. So as you notice, culturally, I'm not sure if people have been paying attention. It's really been shifted in the nonprofit industry. Back in the day, if you noticed, a lot of the directors and board of members were much older. They weren't really in tune with the times. So, you know, for example, having an organization where we focus on girls between 14 to 21, and yeah, we could have directors that are 65, 70 because they have the money, you know, the experience, but they don't know what a 14-year-old girl is going through now because times have really changed from when they were 14, right? They don't know the troubles that they're going through unless they're watching the news, unless they do research. So when it comes to the role of leadership within organization shifting, I totally believe this. I believe that, so this is probably I'm probably the only person on the panel who believes this. I'm going to say this right now, but I do believe you need to go back to, in an organization, your why, right? So again, if you're focused on mental health issues, I truly believe you need to have leaders on your organization who have already gone through this, who have experienced it, right? Versus someone who's looking on the outside saying, well, I heard that so-and-so works, but you don't know that because you've never gone through it, right? Same with us, like we have a junior board because we know that these older board members, they're great leaders, but they can't really help us with what we're looking for, right? They can't, these young girls that come in at 14 to 21, you know, and they're looking up at the board and they're saying, okay, well, I want to be like her, but she's in a whole different time versus saying, oh, looking at the junior board and saying, wow, she's probably like 25 and, you know, she made it, she became a leader, right? So I do think that this whole ageism thing is very important nowadays. Even culturally is very important depending on the organization purpose and the values and the mission behind it, where you have to look at your organization and say, where are we falling apart right now? You know, we have these leaders who don't even understand the organization, they don't understand the mission behind it, and you need to have people on your team that understand what's going on. You need to have people who look like the people you're trying to help, right? Because for me, I'm not going to walk into an organization that's, let's say, for young Black women that have, you know, got pregnant at an early age or whatever the case being, and see no one on the board who's ever read everybody's bio and nobody's gone through it. So how can you help me? How can you tell me that this works if you don't even know what's going on, right? So I think with the nonprofit world, leadership is definitely shifting. A lot of the leaders are much younger. A lot of the leaders are in tune with what's really going on, and they themselves have gone through what's happening to these young people in, you know, whatever the value or the mission of the organization is. So I do think that for profit is a little bit different, and I know it's shifting as well, but I do think the nonprofit world, it's completely changed. It's very different. It's more eye-opening. You know, you're looking at many different leaders. You're not just looking at one straight board of certain people, certain men. You know, you're looking at a board of different cultures, different women, you know, women, men, like whatever the case being. But I do agree, yes, it is shifting.
Thank you so much. Barbie, I'm going to come to you. Same exact question.
I think I want to touch on something that Susan mentioned, in that throughout the past, you know, since COVID especially, we're seeing our employees in a different way. We're seeing them on Zoom like we are right now. So you're seeing into someone's home, you're seeing kids walking by, or animals, or any number of things that we wouldn't have seen before. And what I love about this is it really helps to reinforce a message that I've been sharing for years when I'm coaching leaders, is that we don't hang our humanity at the door when we clock in for work. And when we think about how everything and the zeitgeist of our world is changing, and to use your word, shifting, we have to see people as whole people. There's this weird thing that happens when someone becomes an employee. We fail to see them as the multidimensional person they actually are, and we see them like as this flat person. They're an employee now, right? So now we have to treat them a certain way because they're an employee, versus they are a very sophisticated consumer in the world. And employees want a consumer-like experience in the workplace as well. It needs to be reflective of the way we treat people outside of the employee-employer relationship. And leaders really have to wrap their head around this to understand, again, it's not a one-size-fits-all. and to anchor that to your values. I do a lot of work with my clients on operationalizing your values or your leadership competencies and behaviors, because that's how we get to really influence change and transformation, is to focus on the how of the work we do. Every email, every conversation, every interaction is an opportunity to enhance and build on your connection with the person on the other side, instead of it just being this, I'm shooting out information and you're just going to receive it. Let's create a meaningful, collaborative approach to what we do, and seeing them in their whole selves and their talents, but also their challenges, and helping to move them forward is so important. And we do have a unique environment right now where we have, in some cases, 4 or 5 generations of people working in one organization. You know, I've worked for some of the world's largest brands as well as startups. And when you have hundreds of thousands of employees in a company, you're going to have a huge cross section of ages, of races, of backgrounds. And so tapping into that is incredibly valuable. And up until recently, we've looked at D&I or DE&I or DE&IB and as an initiative that we pull off the shelf, and okay, we're gonna work on diversity and inclusion now. And what I try to share with folks is it needs to be a through line. It's got to be part of the cornerstone of everything you do. If you're looking at those types of cultural competencies as a project or as an initiative, you're not going to see the transformation you're looking for. And leadership of the future and how it's shifting is that we use those elements as part of the lens through which we look at everything we do. Because employees and people want to be seen, heard, valued, and understood. And that's the job of a leader, is to make sure that every person in that organization, every person they connect with is seen, heard, valued, and understood. And we do that by focusing on the how of the work we do, not simply the results of the work we do. So I see that as being a huge shift, and it's happening in pockets, but we've got to embrace that more and more. And when we look at the cross-functional or the cross generations, I think we can tap into some great experiences of folks from older generations and use that to help bring up the new talent coming in, because there's great things that have happened in every generation, and there's not great things that have happened. So let's leave behind what doesn't serve us any longer and really embrace the things we know can help our workforces and our people.
Thank you so much to all of you. I think my organization, if you've joined us previously on the Virtual Business Bites, you may have heard me say it, embraces the concept of failing forward. Silicon Valley has long talked about the importance of iteration and failing fast, but I think that this messaging is that in this place of shift, that we're moving forward, that we are through embracing the diversity of experiences, and whether that's age, culture, positional praxis, economic diversity, ability and ableism and diversity, thought diversity. As we embrace these elements, we're able to move forward, and we're able to create a culture where our teams are seen. Jeanine, I'm going to come to you, and I'm going to ask you if, from your experience today, you were given the opportunity to offer a piece of advice, something that you think is a unique perspective that will allow leaders to embrace this concept of failing forward, of moving forward, and better prepare them for tomorrow's workplace. What would that advice be? And why is the advice you choose particularly an important consideration?
Perfect, thank you. So the one particular advice that I would offer everyone is learn your actual leaders. So if you have executives and you're the actual director, like the head director, I would say learn your leaders, because your leaders are who your coordinators, your specialists are going to look at and they're going to speak to. Make sure that you're setting the example for your leaders. When they come into our workplace, you have that one-on-one with them to let them know how to be the best leader or future leader that they could be. As well as you yourself, is just make sure that you are at the top of you understand your industry, you understand, how can I be a better leader, or how am I going to lead my team? How am I going to show my team that this is the way that our industry is going, and this is how I want us to go, and I want to make sure that we're leading versus we're being, we're using our titles as entitlements towards our staff members, because I think it's very, very important for us to prepare those leaders coming in on how to actually be leaders for their staff members.
Thank you so much. Barbie, I know you provide regular advice to a global community through your live talks and through your coaching programs. What's one piece of advice you would present today?
I would say teach them to think. Help your folks understand how to do a root cause analysis versus chasing symptoms. We spend so much time chasing symptoms, and we solve the same problem over and over and over again, and we don't make the progress we need to make. So teaching people how to think is using data, using your experience and the experience of others, and your intuition. Right? Your intuition, I believe, your instinct, whatever you want to call it, is a superpower that we have not really tapped into. I think women definitely tap into it more, but I believe that is kind of the trifecta of decision making and being able to influence decisions in an organization, is combining data, experience, and your own gut instinct to help inform decisions and help direct decisions. So as leaders are growing up, they have to learn to trust themselves. And in order to do that one of the skills they can do is to learn how to get to the root cause of something, which often means pause, listen, ask more questions, dive deeper, and ensure that you're not just chasing down excuses, that you're really getting to what is driving the problem and what's truly broken. Because we can look at things at a very superficial level and roll out programs and solutions, and then we realize that wasn't actually the problem at all. So I would say that, and then I would tap into what Susan said earlier, is iterate. We no longer need to implement $500 million technologies in 2 years worth of project time. Iterate small tech to solve a specific problem that then integrates with other pieces. So that's what I would share with them.
Thank you so much. Susan, coming to you.
Yeah, my I think driving piece of advice is to believe in yourself and believe in your best self. And to do that, you have to be your authentic self, as everyone has been mentioning. And to do that, ask for feedback, listen to the feedback. It's what holds us to the ground on our own self-awareness. And without self-awareness, it's really hard to lead and impossible to become our best selves. So believe in yourself, believe that anything is possible, believe you can change things, believe you can do anything. The power of younger leadership for me is the longer we can keep people in that mindset, believing in the possible, being inquisitive, the better the world's going to be. If you believe in possibilities, then you can make them a reality, right? And believe in the tooth fairy as long as possible, as silly as that sounds. Don't cut that short. You've got to have some dream in you to make a real impact. And then do what you believe is right. It's not what's expedient. And I'm not even talking about the easy black and white. There's a lot of gray out there. So do what you believe is right, not what's expedient, not what's comfortable. Someone else mentioned that. Often push against the grain, not knowing where that's going to lead and not being afraid of failing. Knowing it's going to require short-term sacrifice, but do what you believe is right. And with all of that belief, love people, and not in that squishy, like your family kind of love, but approach relationships and the folks you're interacting with and leading, loving them, seeking the best in them, being open to the best in them, and then approach them with the intent of seeing the world through the other person's eyes as best as we can. It's really important, I think, to remember that leadership and great leadership is time inefficient. So if you believe, believe in yourself, in what is possible, do what you believe in and love people and take the time to transform them, anything's possible.
This is a powerful conversation, and I don't want it to end, but it's time for us to get to some of these audience questions. And I'm going to consolidate. I saw some themes coming through in the audience questions. I was being direct sent ahead, and they touch a bit on a question that Marcella shared with the group in chat, which is this idea about motivation and the idea of leadership's role in creating culture, whether that culture is creating a culture, as Shelley shared in the group chat, around bringing together a hybrid or remote workforce, or that culture is bringing together the 5+ generations that are working together across a global organization. What's leadership's role in inspiring and motivating a team toward a shared goal or result? And I'll leave it open to the group for you to chime in on this.
I would love to chime in on this one because I spend a lot of time talking about this, as you can imagine. One of the core elements that I hope our future leaders understand is that humans are innately motivated in two ways. And we often misuse the word motivate when we actually mean inspire. We are hardwired and motivated to either avoid pain or seek pleasure. If we think back in caveman times, right, what were we doing? We were running away from being eaten, we were seeking food, and we were procreating to stay alive. So that is still part, that's literally scientifically proven, is still part of our DNA and our brain function, to seek pleasure or avoid pain. So what we have to do is say, what does that look like in the workplace? What does that look like from an employee perspective? And if you are asked to put a project team together or to run an initiative, choose your team. Who are you going to choose? And we typically reach for the people who are super outgoing and the people who are, oh, I want to help, because those people are usually the pleasure seekers, right? The shiny new object. They're change champions. They want to do something new. And we look at the other folks who are like, no, don't call on me, I'm not interested, as negative, right? And they're not necessarily negative, but they can potentially see the pitfalls that you're going to encounter. So what if we were able to tap into their intrinsic motivation and help them help us? What if we said to those people we perceive as negative, hey, tell me all the ways in which you think this is going to fail. Tell me why you think this is a bad idea. Now we've engaged them in a way that resonates with them. Now they feel a part of it because we're listening to why they are not supportive of something. So we've got to understand that motivation is not something we can necessarily change, but we can tap into it and then inspire them to contribute in a way that makes sense for them. So that's the first thing around motivation I want everybody to understand. And when we think about culture and how they can feel a part of the culture, if we remember, everyone wants to be seen, heard, valued, and understood. So if you can tap into their innate motivations, they're going to feel seen. And then we ask them, tell me why this will work, why this won't work. What are your thoughts? Now they are going to feel heard and valued for that experience and that insight. And they're going to feel understood because we took the time to listen to them with intent to do something with that information. So that's a huge leadership lesson that a lot of folks don't get right for a really long time. And we tend to stay away from people we perceive as negative. And I challenge you to embrace those folks and bring them in. That's how you create a truly inclusive culture, by tapping into what people already think and believe and make it a part of what we're doing. So that would be one thing I would share.
Thank you so much. I truly wish that this was a full day session. I often feel that at the end of a Business Bites or virtual Business Bites, that I wish we were together the whole day talking about these important topics. I know that we're nearing the end of our official time together, and I want to recognize the other question that came through, which is around specific resources. So if any of our panelists have an answer for our audience on this idea of what resources are recommended, I encourage you to share it in the chat. And I encourage you all, whether you're live with us today in this conversation, or you're reading in the future or listening in the future to our session, to seek out our panelists who are on here. They're publicly on LinkedIn. They share a tremendous amount of valuable information themselves, giving back to the community through a number of live workshops. So certainly look them up. With that, Marcella, I'm going to hand it back to you to conclude our program today. But I can't finish without saying a deep and express gratitude to each of you for really taking the time to share with us. You're each volunteers, and we truly appreciate your contribution. Marcella, back to you.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you to our panelists, Susan, Jeanine, and Barbie, for taking the time out of your day to share your insight and expertise with us. This was an amazing and valuable session on the role of leadership and the future of management. I will be sending a feedback survey into the chat box, and please take this moment to let us know how we can improve our future sessions. We will be hosting an event next month, so be on the lookout for our follow-up email where you can find November's event registration along with the replay link to this session. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you next time.